This is Brian Terrian from the Disability Digest here with my special guest, Stephen Heisler. How you doing today, Stephen?
How you doing, Brian? It's good talking to you.
Good. I'm doing great. Listen, I want to thank you in advance for coming out. My part of what I attempt to do for the Disability Digest and others out there is to help them get absolutely everything they're entitled to for benefits. So I'm excited to share the work that you have done over the last 30 years and help them understand that maybe they're entitled to something else that they don't know about, right?
Yeah.
So, before we get into that, you've worked with over 20,000 different individuals, helping them with legal issues from Social Security disability, medical malpractice, defective drug devices, nursing home neglect, discrimination, knee and hip, malpractice issues, sexual abuse, so on and so forth. So, I thank you for joining. I expect there's unfortunately some listeners out there that this may be an issue for, and they haven't taken any action and perhaps should or could. So that's what we're here to talk
Correct.
about today.
Well,
So
that is, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's it. No worries. So for you folks listening out there, Stephen has been running the National Injured Senior Law Center, and your focus is basically to get people what they're entitled to if some wrongdoing has happened to them. I mean, that's about as plain and basic English as I can put it. But
Right.
tell us, okay, I mean, you've done all these different things and you've been in the different areas of law. Why did you decide to just hone in and focus on this area, Stephen?
Well, that's a great question, Brian. And again, I thank you for letting me come on and talk a little bit about what I do. So I started out about 30 years ago as a general practice attorney. I decided in the mid 90s to just focus on injury cases, and I found that over the years that I developed a certain affinity for representing seniors and the elderly, and I've represented thousands of seniors and elderly individuals who've had all types of things happen to them. So along that process, I took note of several things that kind of like directed me to this type of practice. The first thing was that, well, the most important thing was I had an incident happen to my grandfather when I was in law school back in 1986. To make a long story short, he was a 76-year-old retiree in Florida who had a back condition that probably he could have gone on and with some physical therapy or some over-the-counter medication could have lived and enjoyed his retirement. Unfortunately, he went to an orthopedic doctor who recommended surgery, and as a result, he agreed to have it. Now, what wasn't taken into consideration is that he had a heart condition, and at 76, and back in the 1980s, 76 was elderly, considered elderly, that was an unusual, it was a risk that he did not have to take. And had he been properly advised by his orthopedic or by the anesthesiologist, there's a good chance that he would not have elected to have the surgery, and he would have lived for a much longer period. But he went ahead and had the surgery, and he stroked out on the table and
No.
died several days later. Yeah. So, and it devastated the family because we were a very close knit family, and it would anyone who loses a parent or a grandparent. It devastated my mom, and it was her
Hmm.
dad, and devastated
Hmm.
me. I'm the number one grandson, so I had a lot of great times with my grandfather. So that always kind of stuck with me, and as I practiced law for the last 30 years, I've kind of seen how seniors and elderly are devalued by society, are really not only devalued, but are not treated well, treated unfairly, and uh, treated rudely by society, especially the medical industry. So that's something which I always had in mind when representing uh, injured individuals. But a couple of years ago, I said, you know what, I want to really shift my focus over to uh, starting an advocacy group that not only represents injured individuals, injured seniors, and injured elderly, but also to advocate on their behalf,
Hmm.
whether in the courtroom, in the legislature, in the media. So that's what that's what got me started. The other thing is that, or two other things quickly. One third of our population now are seniors. Our seniors comprise one third of the U.S. population. So it's a growing population which needs to have effective representation, like I said, in the courtroom, in the legislature, in the public eye. Um, and, I'm a senior myself. So and I love working with seniors. That's a third reason, is that I really really love working with the
Hmm.
aging population. So
Hmm.
those are the reasons why. And I up until I just started this, I still have another practice, the injury lawyer, and I do workers' comp and represent people of all ages. But we're shifting our focus over to the National Injured Senior Law Center.
Hmm. I have listened to your podcast, Injured Senior Podcast, and you've invited me on there, and I graciously thank you for that. But my point is that not only are you litigating cases and recovering for individuals, you are providing a fantastic service, in my opinion, by educating on a variety of topics that impact this segment of our population. So I applaud you for that. It's hard work.
Thanks.
It's hard work
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
hopefully your listeners will at least go on and listen to the podcast and subscribe, because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
plan on putting a lot of really good content on there to educate and inform
Yeah.
everyone, not only the elders and the seniors, but their children or their caregivers or their
Hmm.
loved ones.
Hmm. I wanted to ask you about this, Stephen, as the seniors and elderly are targeted as a profit center, and um, you know, I, it may be obvious to some why, but I'd like to hear like a quick explanation, in your opinion, as to why, and if you have perhaps a tip for people that or two of how to prevent themselves from being exploited. I don't want to take business away from you, but I mean,
Now,
we want to, right? We want to do the best we
we
can.
want to we would love to have a world where there's no elderly or
Right.
senior abuse. No, there's no question about that. So to answer your first question, yes, the elderly population is considered a profit center by the medical industry, by the nursing home industry, by the pharmaceutical industry, by the medical device industry. And the reason is very simple. Not all seniors and elderly uh, would be considered vulnerable or frail, but there's a lot of seniors and elderly people that really can't speak up for themselves. It's interesting because my grandfather is so representative of what the mindset was at the time and still is of the senior and elderly population. And that mindset is that, well, the doctor says I need surgery, or the pharmaceutical industry says I need this drug, and they're the experts, so I'm going to do what they say.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like low-hanging fruit. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give visibility to issues that maybe a senior or elderly person just didn't think about or didn't know about, and maybe they should think twice. So my answer to your first question really is they're low-hanging fruit, and what they can do, or what their children or loved ones can do, is make sure that they have a discussion with them about the pros and the cons, and that they dig a little deeper and investigate. You know, back in 1986, my grandfather did not have the internet, and my family didn't have the internet. You can go on the internet and type in dangers of,
Mm-hmm.
and then just type in dangers of back surgery with a heart condition,
Mm-hmm.
dangers of nursing homes, falls in nursing homes. So, that's just something that is imperative in order for our aging population to be able to take back their lives and not put it in the hands of these different interest groups and corporations and industries.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
You had a
and
second
continue,
question.
please. Well, no, but I
Yeah,
actually I want to pause you on this one. I have listened,
sure.
like I mentioned, to some of your podcasts, and you're actually covering some of this awareness information that I feel is necessary for people. So, which is free. People can go over again, and we'll put a link below the show notes here to tune into your podcast. That's simple. Anybody can just click that button on their phone, their tablet, or their computer and listen to a show.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right. So, we talked about preventative steps,
Yes.
which we talked about too, right? Doing some research, tuning into the podcast. Are there any other
Well, but there's more.
Okay, good.
So, I know I don't want to take up all of your listeners' time, but I'm going to just kind of go over a couple practice areas where I could give a couple of tips. And by the way, most of these tips I've gotten off of the experts who've appeared on my podcast, or experts that I've worked with in cases. So, for instance, we have a serious situation in the medical malpractice field, and that's something called sepsis. And sepsis is not really, it's like the little known secret that's killing a big part of our population, especially our seniors and our elderly population.
Mm-hmm.
So sepsis is the body's inflammatory response to infections. And who are most susceptible to getting infections? But it's the seniors and the elderly. And when I talk about infections, the number one is urinary tract infections.
Really?
So what happens is that, urinary tract infections are the number one infection that turns into sepsis, again, where the body starts to shut down, and sepsis, if not treated, turns into septic shock. And septic shock is where your blood pressure plummets and your organs start to fail because they're not getting any blood or any oxygen. And there were 250,000 people in the United States last year that died from sepsis. And those are the ones we know about. I know that we're time starved, or we're time sensitive here, so I don't want to, that's something though that is an area that so the preventative measure, the thing that we need to do is we need to have, especially a senior or elder, needs to be able to recognize when there is an infection or there is signs of sepsis. And I can just tell you, mental confusion is one sign, and the person just not acting like they normally do. But if you listen to episode 8, I believe it is, on my podcast, John Casconi, Dr. John, as I call him, gives a great episode and gives us so much information on how to recognize sepsis in the elderly and seniors. I implore your listeners to listen to that episode. Quickly, also, hospital infections are really, really something that can be prevented, and that's MRSA, C. diff, which is really it's a terrible infection, causes a lot of diarrhea, and then turns into sepsis a lot. Surgical site infections, ventilator assisted pneumonia, prescription errors, surgical anesthesia errors. Those are all things that can be prevented. And the one other thing I want to talk about real quickly, or two others real quick, is nursing homes, because 2 million people are in long-term care facilities, and the state of care in the nursing home industry, nursing home assisted living facilities, is despicable. It's despicable, Brian. 350,000 people die a year in long-term care facilities from just infections. And the infections can be prevented. And our expert really came on, Brian Malott, and basically what he had to say is that in order to limit or to reverse the trend where people are dying from infections, there needs to be the child or the caregiver needs to come in and needs to make sure that they are keeping their eyes on all the things that are going on. So if you want your loved one to live in a long-term care facility and stay alive, you need to be involved. The same goes for elder abuse. I had Paul Greenwood, who is a elder abuse expert, and it's a wonderful, wonderful episode. He's British, and he was came over in the 60s and never left. He saw Easy Rider, and that he saw Easy Rider, said, I want to go look, I want to travel to the United States. So he came over here, and he's an attorney, became an attorney, and then became an expert in elder abuse and prosecuted some really, really horrible elder abuse cases. But what he said that really kind of stayed in my mind was that in order to prevent elder abuse, the child needs to be in touch with mom or dad on a regular, consistent basis every day. And as far as financial exploitation, that you should contact the bank for your parent and tell the bank, look, I have an elderly parent, and maybe there's a caregiver coming in, I just want you to know that if you see some sketchy transactions, that you should alert the authorities about it. So it's just really things that I just never thought about. So
never would have thought of that.
Those are just those are some preventative things you can do.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So listen, I want to just recap a few things here. My message to people out there is, this may not be something, I hope it's not something that has impacted you yet, and you can use these preventative measures, but if it has, for sepsis or medications or ventilators or surgical or any other issues, then get educated, take action, and we'll put some contact information below this interview. But they have access to meet and talk to somebody on your team for free to learn more and see if they...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So if you email me at info@injuredseniorhotline.com, I will get right back to you, and you're going to get a call from me so we can talk about your situation. And there may or there might not be a case, but at least I'll be able to get the information and give it an assessment and let you know my thoughts.
Great. Well, listen, I thank you for helping me help others, with the awareness and get all that they're entitled to, Stephen. You're doing great work and making a difference out there, so I appreciate you coming out and spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks, Brian. It's my pleasure anytime.